Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging Employee Advocacy to Drive Engagement in Sales. Really excited to have you all here today. So just a few logistics items before we get started. During the webinar, you'll be in listen-only mode, but if you have any questions, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature located at the top left of your screen. We'll try to address these at the end, or we'll follow up with you directly afterwards. We'll also share a recording of this webinar in case you want to revisit it or share with a colleague. So let me officially introduce myself. My name is Megan Krasinski. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Olapic. Very excited to be leading this webinar live today from my home in New York City, and equally excited to have my colleague, Tim Palmer, join me, who's based in London. Hi, Tim.
Hi, thanks, Megan. Yeah, so I'm Tim, Senior Account Manager here, based at Olapic's London office, but of course working from home right now. I've been at Olapic for 3 years, and before that I was working at a major global fashion company and directly worked on an employee advocacy program. So I'm excited to be joining you to talk about this topic today.
It's great to have you. So on the agenda for today's webinar, we're going to walk you through the opportunities that you have with EGC, ways that you can shape your EGC strategy, and some best practices and quick tips to get started. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll save some time at the end for some Q&A. So I'm going to kick us off talking about the wealth of opportunities with EGC. But I guess before I get too ahead of myself, because I typically tend to do that since I live in my Olapic UGC bubble, I'll start us off with what actually is EGC. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, EGC is essentially any form of content that is created and distributed by, you probably guessed it, your employees. It can be content in the form of videos, images, blogs, anything promoting your brand values, differentiators, benefits, and what makes your business you. So I love this quote from Starbucks chairman Howard Schultz, because Starbucks has such a strong employee brand advocacy strategy. In fact, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but Starbucks actually doesn't refer to their employees as employees, but rather as partners. If you check out their website, they state, we call our employees partners because we are all partners in shared success. So I thought this was a really great way to kick us off, because that simple name change totally transforms the traditional employer-employee dichotomy. And it really gives employees a sense of ownership in your brand. And when you give employees that sense of ownership, in return, they feel empowered to be true ambassadors, just as this quote highlights. So we'll move on to the numbers. I wouldn't be a good marketer if I told you to do something without having some stats to back it up. And there are some really strong metrics out there behind the power of EGC. These are just a few good ones that we wanted to highlight today. I'm going to take a second or two to highlight these last two stats. I thought they were really, really powerful. So brand messages get reshared 24 times more frequently when shared by employees versus the brand. And 45% of consumers say they are more likely to research a product or service when someone relatable like an employee posts about it. So I think what these are really saying is, if you're looking for more reach and more awareness, you really need to look no further than right at your fingertips at your employee base. So why EGC? So I touched on Starbucks and their positioning and a few data points. And I know we're still early in the webinar, but for those of you who may be a bit skeptical, I get it, especially in terms of content control risks, which I know we're all very cognizant of, which Tim will give us some insights on shortly. I do think it's important to take this time to highlight why this form of advocacy and content is so powerful. So we've listed some reasons here, but I'll go through just a few. So reduce marketing costs, this first bullet point. I think especially now this is really important. I think we're all assessing our marketing budgets given the current climate. So instead of spending a ton of money on paid ads to get your content seen, you can use your workforce to help you. It's also more likely that content shared by your employees will resonate and perform better than traditional marketing or HR copy. The organic reach of all of your employees combined often goes far beyond what your social channels can. And just in the interest of time, since I know Tim is probably eager to hop on, I'll combine this second bullet point here with the last one, which is essentially saying that EGC helps you to deliver fresh and authentic content. Your employees live and breathe your brand daily, so their content has real relevance. Plus, your employees know your products and services better than anyone, so they can write informatively and really are the most credible voices you have. Also, it certainly doesn't hurt that you get additional content produced while also keeping your employees motivated. So with that, I'll now pass it over to Tim, who will talk a bit more about how to build and grow your EGC strategy.
Yeah, thanks. So I wanted to start by giving you some guidance on actually setting up an employee advocacy program and what that process could look like. Like, how can you create a workable solution for your brand? And we've kind of outlined for you 6 steps here for starting an ongoing employee advocacy program that can help you to get content on a regular basis. So starting off, definitely define your needs and set goals. What does your brand want to achieve from this, and how will it measure success? Like, for you, is this purely branding, or are you interested in boosting product coverage, for example? And that can help you outline the shape of your program. I'm just going to pause a minute there just to mention that you should definitely consult with your in-house legal and HR teams about what's acceptable in your own organizations, and making sure you adhere to local laws as well. Like, we don't want you to get into trouble for asking employees to do anything that you don't have approval to do. So that's just important to note. I'd also suggest not going from 0 to 60 straight away, as that could get a little bit messy and overwhelming. So maybe a trial or one-off campaign with those employees who are already advocating your brand. And where are you going to find them? Well, you should be able to spot them on social media because they're probably already sharing content. They can help set the tone as well for others to follow. Number 3 is really about making sure you're clear with your employees by giving examples and guidelines on what you expect from them, but try not to be too restrictive because you don't want to put people off. And appoint an advocacy liaison. So this was actually me in a past life, and it can be really rewarding. So someone needs to own that relationship with the advocates and the communication. But that person also needs to make sure that they're motivating so the program doesn't fizzle out. So think about who this should be in your own organization. And I think for number 5, we're really just talking about when you're set up and the program has been rolling for a while. Like, of course, employees do come and go, and you can't just expect existing advocates to maintain the same rhythm. So just keep up with best practices and trainings where possible, especially because your own goals around the program might change as well. And I think that ties into the final point as well. Just keep communicating. Don't let people forget about the program, whether that's the advocates themselves or showcasing to the rest of the business the great content that's being produced. And of course, highlight the benefits, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but career growth, incentives, gamification, for example. And then moving on to some do's and don'ts, I think it's really important to remember that employees should participate because they want to, not because they feel they have to. As I said before, try not to be too restrictive. You know, you can give them guidelines, but make sure they have creative freedom too. It should be fun. And remember, it's okay for people to say no to this as well. Of course, incentivization can be really motivating, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it shouldn't feel like you're bribing people either. And then how can Olapic's technology suite help you? Well, With our user-generated content platform, you can set up specific hashtags and campaigns. You can manage the rights approval either through messaging and specific T's and C's or our whitelisting feature. And once you've created the content, of course, you've got the opportunity to push that content to Instagram, paid social ads, and feature it on your site, either in specific areas or mixed in with your UGC. And then for the more mature employee advocacy programs that could involve like hundreds or thousands of employees, our influencer marketing platform can help with the end-to-end process of briefing campaigns, managing incentives, and tracking the content's performance on social as well. And yeah, of course, not forgetting video. As we all know, video content is more and more of a necessity, and leveraging your employees' content is a great way to drive engagement and performance. So we can see an example here on the right, for example, with employees' content turned into a video.
Amazing, thanks, Tim. So next, as we outlined earlier in our agenda, we're gonna take some time to talk about 2 best practice scenarios that you can achieve with EGC. Building trust internally and externally with both your employees and your consumers, and of course, what we all care about, driving sales. So our goal of providing these tips here is so you can leave this webinar today and get started implementing your EGC strategy right away, or even enhance your existing EGC strategy. So the first scenario we're gonna cover is building credibility and trust. And the first thing I wanna highlight is encourage people to share life at your company. Of course, I'm a marketer, so I had to use an Olapic example here. So when we kicked off working from home back in March, we on the Olapic marketing team wanted to do a fun promotion to see our employees work from home EGC, which, you know, admittedly came a bit more naturally to us, but it was a great way for us to stay connected, especially during these difficult times. In fact, we made it a bit funner and offered an incentive to our employees, as Tim just highlighted, as a potential due for growing your EGC strategy, to the employee who shared the best piece of EGC. So what was really great about this was our employees were really engaged. We collected a lot of content. It was great to talk over Slack over everyone's images and what they've been doing at home. And in return, we as a business now have an awesome community page on olapic.com with our community work from home gallery, as you can see here, as well as all the marketing resources we've put together to help clients navigate this environment. So this example is just relevant to the times, but it's really important overall to market the culture of your company with either videos or photos, testimonials even, and tailored messaging from your employees. What's also great about this is it gives potential candidates the opportunity to get a sense of who you are and the culture that your brand represents. So the next is to create opportunities for engagement and content creation. So a lot of brands are doing this, and we at Olapic definitely highly recommend it, specifically to get more content for a product, for a campaign launch that you may have. You could also do it for unique events or holidays that perhaps you already have mapped out in your marketing calendar. Like this awesome example to the right that IKEA did for Pride. They promoted the event with their tagline, "Love doesn't require instructions," which I love, and a hashtag to collect content around this. So hashtag Love IKEA. This is also a great idea to stimulate employee participation. Perhaps you could do this for a community-driven campaign, as I showed you in our previous Olapic example. In fact, if you are interested in doing something like this for your site, we at Olapic are offering complimentary galleries right now to clients who want to highlight their communities. So definitely reach out and let us know if you're interested, and we'd be happy to help. And finally, I shared earlier how to promote your company and your culture to the world, but this next one helps you to promote you to your employees. It's important for your employee base to feel invested in. make them feel like partners, to quote Starbucks again. So these examples to the right are just a few brands that we found that invested in dedicated website pages and Instagram handles, like you can see here, not only to promote their employees, but promote their experience working for their company, as well as job opportunities that these employees can look into to help further their careers. I think the great thing about this is doing these kind of things helps to bring more job satisfaction to your employees, which ultimately leads to higher productivity, morale, and a lower risk of employee turnover. So to wrap up this theme before I pass it back over to Tim, of credibility and trust, when you create the conditions for employees to feel more engaged in their work, they will convey a much more authentic, positive representation of your company, really more than any amount of advertising can do. In fact, I read a Gallup report that stated that engaged employees can even increase sales by around 20%. So really, satisfied employees lead to satisfied customers. And speaking of satisfied customers, I'll now turn it back over to Tim, who will talk us through how your employees can help to drive engagement and sales.
Yeah, so the second scenario we wanted to discuss is using EGC to drive engagement and sales. As we know, creating lifestyle content can be both expensive and time consuming. And when you combine that with product turnover, I think there's a lot of potential for employee generated content to be really beneficial. So yeah, product coverage. We know that there's a direct correlation between the number of images per product and interaction rates, and then a strong relationship between the number of photos and conversion. So with Olapic, we can help you identify gaps in your product coverage, such as top viewed items without any UGC. And then cross-referencing this with your own selling information can help you target products you want your employees to highlight. I think a really strong example is asking employees to create content for new products, which might be taking a little time to gain traction with customers, or even items that have been in the sale for a while and have no content, for example. And of course, some products just aren't as sexy. So while customers might be all about taking selfies with a nice patterned dress, think about asking your employees to show off that basic white tee, like how do they style it and what with. Yeah, and another big point here is if you're a global brand, go for diversity and engage with employees across your different markets to showcase how products might be used or styled differently as well. And Macy's does a really good job of empowering their employees to become ambassadors with an incentives program based on the amount of sales their content generates. So this is a really sophisticated setup, but it's not just about financial incentives. They also have experiences and prizes on offer, but also glory goes a long way as well. So think about setting up a competition or leaderboard for producing the best or most amount of content during a month or particular season. And remember that employees choosing to take part are also investing time and effort in your company. So whether that's in work time or outside of it, they're investing in the brand, the company. So try and tie this in with career development. It's a great way to motivate these employees as well. And I think it's also worth remembering that while a lot of people might be happy to take part, they might not be willing to share content on their personal Instagram. So there's a couple of ways you can combat this. First could be work Instagram handles. And I think ASOS is a really good example of this. So they'll have like ASOS_Megan, for example, to separate work posts from a personal account. But the other option is Olapic's uploader functionality. So whether that's an uploader on your site, or the other option is the uploader directly in the platform. So employees could send pics to your liaison contact, who could then upload. That way you still have, great employee generated content on site without them having to share on Instagram if they're not comfortable doing that. And then this one is obviously for when we're back in the office, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to at this point. But for one of my clients, we analyzed which products were missing coverage, and they saw samples of some of those products in the office. They then booked out an afternoon and set up a makeshift photo studio in a meeting room with backdrops and props. And then teams had slots so they could go up for 15 minutes, take photos, and then there were prizes for the best entries. I think this is a really nice way of doing something fun with your colleagues, and also highlighting EGC and UGC to the rest of the organization.
Thanks, Tim. And I fully expect us to have this type of photo shoot when I can eventually come visit you back in London. So before we get to the Q&A section of our webinar, I thought it'd be really great to open and close with quotes, but this one is from Amazon social media team. Your employees are the heart and soul of your company. Who better to talk about you? Coach, train, enable, and incentivize your brand. Why? Because people trust people. So to close on this, user-generated content is often coined the epitome of social proof because of its authenticity, and really EGC is just merely an extension of UGC. So we recommend leveraging this heart and soul of your company to create an engaging, authentic, and sales-driving presence. Doing the things we outlined in this webinar today will make a true difference for your company. So with that, I will now jump into Q&A, and I see some questions have come in. The first one I'll direct towards you, Tim. Is it possible to upload EGC automatically to a landing page with a community gallery?
So actually the answer to that would be no. So photos will always need to be approved, even if you have the rights to them. So, I mean, you'd probably expect that all the content being produced by your employees is high quality and within your guidelines. It just wouldn't be sensible to allow content to appear automatically on a page. So a gallery is a great idea. So definitely talk to your account manager to get you help set up with that. And of course, our moderation services can prioritize the EGC so that you can have it on the gallery as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Okay, a second question has come in. I also think this might be a good one for you, Tim. Is there a specific strategy for brands in different verticals?
So I think the key here is just being you as a brand. Like, what is your brand and what do you have to say? So not one company is going to approach their EGC strategy the same, and you definitely shouldn't just be like carbon copying from others. So focus on your specific goals, needs, and get your employees involved in a way that makes sense for you. Again, like your account manager here at Olapic is here to help with this. So they might be able to provide more tailored advice and examples from other clients in your vertical as well.
Awesome. Okay, another question. These are great questions. I think I can grab this one, Tim. Is it possible to get all my workforce producing content? Well, I think that would be ideal, but I think the truth is that not everyone in your employee base is probably going to be interested. Everyone has different cares in terms of social media and their personal branding. And I think Tim highlighted on this earlier in the webinar, if you force them into it, it might feel a bit more like a chore. Instead, it's great to make these things exciting for the organization. Like we had a great time doing this work from home EGC contest over at Olapic, and it really encourages employees to be a bit more involved, have a voice online, and just remember to be more encouraging rather than forceful. Let's see, I have another one coming in. Perhaps, Tim, you can help with this one. How do you assure that you have acceptance from employees to use their images and possibly location as brand content?
Yeah, I think this ties back to what I was saying earlier about checking with your own HR and legal teams. You know, we've heard different stories from different brands about what's okay, whether incentivization is okay, but that also ties into consent, right? So maybe in your organization, your legal team is happy for you to just ask permission and people say yes. But it might be that your legal team is going to ask that everyone who takes part provides written consent or signs some kind of contract. So when I was working for a fashion brand, our store employees who were actually taking part in our program sat down with their store manager and had to sign just like a mini contract just to outline what was the aim of the program and what was expected of them. And I think that also highlighted the formality of it as well.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Tim, I'm punting this over to you again. We don't have a strong D2C website. Can you leverage UGC/EDC images at retailers' websites /PDP?
Yeah, sure. If you've got content appearing on retailers' websites and you've got that set up already, then there's no reason why you can't use the EGC in the same way as the UGC. So whether that's through the Olapic like syndication process, or you're handing that content over to the retailer directly, just make sure that you have consent from your employees and legal teams as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Tim. So I think we're almost right at time. If we were unable to get to your question, we'll definitely reach out to you directly with an answer. But that concludes our webinar on leveraging employee content to drive engagement and sales. On behalf of Olapic, thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Take care and stay safe.